This is Bumping Into, where we have interesting conversations with people from all walks of life.
Hi everybody, welcome to Bumping Into. I am Francis Popular. On this episode, I am talking to Richard Bouris. Richard is the person or part of the team that purchased JB Hi-Fi back in 1983 to grow it into what is, I suppose you could say, we recognise as JB Hi-Fi today. Previously, JB Hi-Fi was owned by John Barbuto, who started it in 1974 with one store. Richard and two of his friends or business partners purchased the business in 1983 and grew the stores from the one store that was original to 10 stores before then selling it and floating it, which then leads us to the JB Hi-Fi that we know today. So this is Richard's story about how that all came about, steps along the way, the processes, the challenges, and then life after selling the JB Hi-Fi business. Now, I do unfortunately have to say that the audio quality of this is not great. So it is going to be hard to stick with. We had some serious phone issues where Richard was that really impacted the quality of this conversation. Now, it does come good probably through halfway onwards. So if you can stick with it, there's a great story behind it. There's some great information, great advice, bits and pieces that you will get from this fascinating story about JB Hi-Fi as a business. But it is going to be hard to stick with at the start because it is very notchy and your typical mobile phone low range cutoffs, I guess you could say. Stick with it if you can, and I'll catch you on the other side.
Francis.
G'day, Richard. How you going?
Good, thank you.
Are you free? Are you right to talk?
Yep.
Oh, great. Richard, what I want to do is I want to go back in time before the JB Hi-Fi purchase. I want to go to what you were doing in the years leading up to before that happened, because what was it? It was 1980...
83.
83. So if we go back in time before then, what were you doing before you were in that position to purchase JB?
Well, starting at the early days, I worked for Mobil Oil. I applied for an overseas position in Papua New Guinea. Lucky to get that. So my wife Alison and myself went to New Guinea in 1972. We had to bring our marriage forward because Mobil only wanted married men, and that wasn't a problem. She cried for a couple of weeks because the house we were supposed to have wasn't finished, and we were stuck in the motel. Then I worked for Mobil in New Guinea for 3 years. During that time, my hobby became hi-fi equipment. A company called Sansui in Japan made very good quality equipment, and I bought up as much Sansui as I could afford.
Wow.
And we came back to Australia in 1975, and my parents had a catering business at Teachers College in Auburn, and so I went into business with them, with my parents, and I hated it. I absolutely hated the food industry. Just didn't suit me.
Right.
And there was a little hi-fi store called Sound Air Hi-Fi in Caulfield, and it wasn't run properly. And the blokes who had it put into receivership. And I thought, well, here's my chance. So I went and saw the official receiver, and he wanted $200 for the Sound Air name and a glass counter that's in the shop. And I had no lease on the shop. I was just more or less rotting there. But I used my own hi-fi equipment, and I got an account with Rank Industries, who distributed Sansui.
Right, okay.
So I was a one-man item for a while, but didn't do a lot of sales because too limited. It was just one person in the store.
Yep.
So I got friendly with another guy who was a service technician, and his name was Rod. And David and I'll be the singing very good. Do the reviews. And that was all right for a while. We bought JB Hi-Fi from John Barbuto in 1983. John had had enough. He said, Richard, hit the rocks. And he talked me into buying his shop in Keilor. He had been operating out of the house in East Keilor, and people came from Rosebud, Mornington, way out places to come and buy stuff off JB Hi-Fi.
So 1983, you purchased the store, the name, I suppose, which now has become quite an iconic Australian business name. You grow it into a chain of 10 stores. So at that time, that was during the 80s, you would have been competing directly with Brushes.
Yes, we were.
And how hard was that? I mean, Brushes were a monster, national retailer at that time.
Yeah, it was pretty easy, to be honest. They had such a high cost structure for their shootouts and having to sell at a higher price. We just undercut their prices.
Right.
And so they tried making it, but it wasn't good enough. People still expected a better discount just for Russian offer.
Yep.
So we probably did it for maybe 2 years. And we turned up, went into sleep.
Do you think? I mean, is it that the timing was right? When JB Hi-Fi was, I suppose the mid '80s, CDs had just come on the scene. Hi-Fi had really probably done a big boom, because of the CD player. Speakers had become much smaller than the big, floor boxes to the bookshelf speakers now became, decent. Do you think it was a combination? And music was also very popular at that time too. Music was a big thing. Even if you look at TV shows, Hey Hey It's Saturday always used to have music guests on. It was a big part of our lives. Do you think it was all those things were combining to just basically be the petrol on the fire of growth?
Yeah, you're right. It's a combination of things. The main one was the pricing. And they didn't range enough. And when we had our 10 stores firing, well, they just couldn't compete with us.
Yeah, and I do remember that association with JB, even as a young kid growing up in Melbourne. It was that Brushes was the more expensive and probably didn't have the extensive range for the enthusiast, where JB tend to have the more bigger range, touching on higher end product, and it was expected that you were going to get it at a cheaper price.
That's right. And we had the hardware too, the electronics, CD players and amplifiers and tuners. We had a bigger range than them.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Even the CDs, I think, you guys probably were a bit more broad. Brushes probably would have been very top 40 focused, where you guys had a bigger selection.
Yeah, we had fantastic back catalogue.
You survived, JB survived the recession, the late 80s, early 90s, when all the businesses, including Brushes, which didn't survive really that time, was that at all a concern at that point in time? Was it ever, any hairy moments during the Australian recession of the 90s?
Well, I personally was affected by it. I've done what a lot of people told me to do. When the house next door comes up, you should buy it. So I did that. In 1989, I bought a house worth $2 million. And I had didn't have really enough funds to support it, so I had to sell it.
Oh,
So
right.
I sold it, but it was my fault, and
Yeah.
it was cost me dearly because
Well,
when I bought it, the interest rates was about 16%,
you're just
and
brutal.
when I sold it, the rates were way down.
So, if you look at the, um, I suppose your period of ownership saw massive growth. I mean, I think I've got here. So if we look at roughly, so say from '83, you you then sold it what 2000?
2003.
Okay, so then it was turning over. If my internet research is anything to go by, so were turning over 150 million back then when you sold it. Now, just prior to that, so Brash's went public in '95, went into administration in '99. So
Right.
as they were going down, you were kicking goals, and then once you sold it, it was floated onto the ASX, and then obviously it's just got massive, huge growth. Now we've got 320 stores that's turning over 9 billion a year. They own other white goods stores. Do you think that there would have been any other way for the team yourselves that when you've bought that business, could that level of growth been achieved without it going public, or that's just what has to happen to virtually take over the whole country?
I think it had to happen that way because us being just private individuals, we can only borrow so much from banks,
Yeah, yeah,
and we had to put our houses on the line. And we were getting quite comfortable the way things were running. So, whereas using brushes again, they turned public before we did,
yeah.
and they had horrible structure.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing because I'm in the middle of reading Jeffrey Brush's book, and I haven't finished it yet. But he does, I suppose he's quite unhappy with the direction that Brush's took once it was taken away from family control,
Yeah,
and he's got a lot of issues. He says bad management, bad decisions, bad culture, unhappy staff, and this and this and that. But it does seem that here is a success story where the business was taken over by an equity firm, and then it listed publicly, and it's continually gotten bigger and bigger. I mean, while we might not see into any of these issues that are happening to do that, but on the facade, there is that line. Brushes went one way and JB sort of went the other. So they've definitely
yeah,
been a successful case of big corporate takeover.
yeah.
And
There was quite a few small issues came up. On the hardware side, we had some good brands,
yeah,
TIAC and Akai and Pioneer and Tashi. But we couldn't get the very big one. It was Sony. They wouldn't supply us because
really,
of pressure from brushes.
wow,
It's
that's
illegal
interesting.
for what they did,
That's
but we can never prove it.
yeah, that's no the typical games at the big end of town, isn't it? Where they look after the mates of mates. Um, but I mean, you guys, I had an association that JB was always a very big with the Pioneer brand, which at the time was seen as
Yeah.
a higher end.
Pioneer was our main current brand. Very good, expensive, reasonable price.
Exactly, yeah, yeah, and that's exactly how I always viewed it as well. Um,
Mm.
Did you ever, at that point in time, did you ever come across any of the Brash's family? Was there ever any interactions with them?
No, I never met them. We knew Conrad Connolly, one of the directors. Great guy, actually. But the Brash's family had or have property down in Portsea, holiday place.
Oh,
I
right.
think they might have had to sell it, but I could be wrong there. So
Do you ever regret selling it? Was there ever a regret that you wish you had kept the direct hands-on involvement?
Yeah, I don't really think about it much. Once you sell something, it was interesting.
Yeah.
No, I think about it. It's family.
Was
Uh,
when you were running it, is there a point in time where you were thinking to yourself, "Oh, this is it. We've made it." You know, your lifestyle had changed. Everything was okay. You had plenty of money in the bank. You had everything that you wanted. Times were good. Was there where this can just keep going, or did that sort of come after you had sold it and stepped away?
I went to we went on holidays. And I had a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
It was in France, actually. And it was very minor and no real damage. But it can be worrying where were we going with this big thing. And David and I decided we'd stop. So
Because that's
we,
obviously the stress that, running a big business, high turnover, high volume of staff. There's always going to be, your time is going to be very thin, and you're always on. It's hard to ever not be on when it's, in essence, your name is on the door. You're the one signing the checks, keeping the wheels turning.
and you probably for the record, how many staff we had. I think from memory we had about 350
Wow,
employees.
that's a lot.
But
Do you think it was the stress of being in business that brings on those sort of things?
well, the heart attack was.
Yeah.
Well, we had two things going. I was building a big house and trying to sell a big house. And, I think it was in 1986. I don't even remember the date.
Just lucky it wasn't a big one. Lucky you lived to fight another day and learn from it a bit.
Yeah, well, I think at the time I wished I'd spent more time with my kids.
And and that's hard, isn't it? In any business, small business, big business, there's that balance, isn't it? And it's hard to. And I don't know if you were the same. I find that even when you go home, your mind is still racing about what you didn't get done and what you've got to get done, and it's so hard to drag yourself to the environment that you would rather be in because your mind is constantly just racing away, trying to solve the next day's problems before they turn up. And as I'm sure you know too, like how fast it goes. When you time just flies, and the busier you are at work, and the more that's happening. While it's only when you look back you go, geez, where did that year go? Where did the next one go? What have I got to show for the last 2 years of tearing my hair out and being stressed out and not getting home until X o'clock at night?
When David and I were running the business, the original store, we had to open at 9 and close at 9.
Oh,
well,
wow.
It's a long day.
Geez, and back then that was the hours. I know now everyone's pushed hours out, but back then that would have been a big, big thing for those sort of operating hours.
Yeah. The only thing we didn't trade on Sunday at that time.
Yeah. I remember that as a kid. All the shops used to be closed on a Sunday.
Right.
But those days are gone now, isn't it? Now it's yeah. So at least you got one day to yourself.
That's right.
But it's hard.
That one day we'd probably lie in bed naked.
Yeah, you're just knackered. Yeah. And the thing is, I've asked people this question, and I've even thought about it myself. And not that if you look at any scale, even small business, the one guy working for himself that has to put all the hats on, come home and do the quotes and do the bookkeeping and do this and do that, to the guy like yourself that grew massive big company, truckload of staff, huge turnover, new problems every day. You go, well, I can't see any other way that you can do it without donating that amount of time to it. It just can't. You can't.
Yeah,
There
yeah,
has to be that trade-off.
yeah. You've got to put the effort in. It's got to be 100%.
What did you want to talk about the last couple of years of what you're up to now?
Got into investing our funds in the share market and in commercial property. So we bought quite a few different things. We owned some of the JB stores, the freeholds, so we retained some of them
Oh,
and we
okay.
sold some of them. Basically, JB had grown out of our size of store. I forget how many square metres we go for, 500 or 600. And they're probably looking at closer to 1,000 square metres because we've got lots and they just needed more space.
And you still have an interest in the hi-fi market as well, don't you?
We do. We're a small importing company which brings in some specialised hi-fi equipment and home theatre, and it's a big supporter of Sony projectors and Sony flat screen TVs.
Wow, so it's
That's
still
run by
still a
my
passion.
son Jeremy.
So,
He's got a small team of about 14 people.
oh, okay,
And
yeah,
they're doing quite well. Mm.
yeah. So it's still obviously you still have a passion for the industry. You still very much love the hi-fi sector.
As I said earlier, when we lived in New Guinea, it became a hobby, and it's become a hobby again. I've got pretty serious equipment at home, and I just love playing with it.
Yeah, what a perfect story that is for someone that was in their hobby, their passion, and ended up building a massive business. Sold it. It's continued to become a massive success. That's the perfect scenario, really, isn't it?
It is. The timing was just all right. When we sold into the year 2000, the economy was really coming along, and it was ideal time to set up new stores.
And
Um,
you, I think I asked you this before. Do you think that what you did, a group of young guys today could do again in the current market, or do you think those days are gone?
I honestly think they could do it in this market.
Because
Um,
if you look at in the last 10 years, we've lost Retrovision, we've lost Chandler's, we've lost more than 10 years now talking about them, but a lot of the music and white goods stores either got bought out or pushed out, and they all cry that there's no margin on the product, but it's I suppose it would be nice to think that a couple of guys with a passion in something could create another big empire like JB Hi-Fi.
yeah,
But it's the right time, right place. A lot of it, isn't it? It's just got to be that stars lining up and the right market conditions, and it's on trend, and it can all happen.
you're pretty right there. The stars are going to line up, and the moon's got to be big.
Yeah, yeah.
But it gets down to taking opportunities when they're possible. Just when I bought JB, the business from John Barbuto, it was just perfect timing because John wanted out, we wanted in, and we went to a trade fair. People were selling hi-fi speakers and wanted us to buy them from them. But we didn't buy them, but I got friendly with John Barbuto. It was just luck. We were standing next to his combi van. We'd had a few drinks, and what they wanted to. And we just agreed we'd pursue the selling from him. And within a couple of weeks, we had it all sorted out.
Wow, it was that quick?
Yeah.
Wow. And what was it about that branding or that store location that made you think, yeah, rather than doing it yourself from scratch?
Well, we're sort of friends with a lot of people in the industry, suppliers and retailers. And I was quite friendly with John. He was a great guy. And that's what created the opportunity. And when I went back to work the next day to tell David what he'd think of buying a shop in East Keilor, he just said, oh, he'd have to be mad. It's such a long drive. But after a couple of days, we thought about it and thought, we can try some nice cars, so let's do it. So David and I have had a passion for motor vehicles. We had lots of good cars. And that was one of the incentives for us to do well. So we could buy more cars.
Well, why not? Why not enjoy? It's owning and running a business is hard work, so you might as well make it a lifestyle factor if you can, and enjoy what it can give you.
Yeah, we'd drive to East Keilor in the morning, and we'd try and get prime spotted on the Tullamarine Freeway. And we didn't go much above the speed limit, but it was good fun.
Wow.
And, yeah.
Look, it's a great story. I'm glad that I've been able to be the one that gets it down on tape, I guess you could say. Is JB still alive? Is he still around?
Yes, there's a little holiday resort called St Leonard's, which is over near Geelong.
Oh, wow. So you still talk to him?
No, I haven't actually spoken to him for years. He wasn't very happy with us when we floated the business.
Oh, well, even after all that time that you owned it, he wasn't happy that you were floating it?
Yeah.
Wow, geez. Isn't that interesting that, after all that time, the market conditions, and exactly like you said, that a lot of things get to a point where you can't make them go any bigger unless you make that radical change. Otherwise you just... And the risk that you could have run is that someone was coming up behind you and overtook.
That's right.
So
there were some big companies I can't think of one of them at the moment, but it wasn't all brushes. They were a part of it. There's some big bulk stores, which a couple of them have been bought by Jody Huffler. Of course, the good guys.
Yep.
They're quite a good operation. Terry Smart, ex-JB, has done a great job with the good guys. And he's a very good operator, Terry.
Harvey Norman's done exceptionally well, and the Good Guys is a big... Now I know it's with JB, but it's still it got to the point before it was with JB. It was still a big business on its own, right?
That's right. The Mules have it, and they're quite a good going there. But JB's come along and bought that too.
It's just the way of the world now, isn't it? Big corporate takeovers.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on. And
Thank you.
And the story. I'm glad that I got the how it happened on tape, because it's a fascinating story. It's a big business. It's I suppose an icon of Australian retail now. It'd be remembered as just something like the Myer type business. It's such a big part of everyday Australian people.
That's right, quite right.
So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thanks very much for listening. I know it wasn't great quality, particularly the first half, so I appreciate that you've managed to stick through it. Now, if you want to know any more about this episode, any other episodes that we have, you can head to bumpinginto.com.au. There'll be an episode page, plus all of the other shows that we have done if there's anything else you wanted to look at. I have one favour to ask. If you liked it or you think anyone else did like it, if you could please share it, and if you could leave a 5-star review. While I don't agree with it, it's the only way that this podcast will get recognised and pushed further up and given as suggestions to other people is based on the 5-star review policy. So if you are in a position to stop and review it on your platform, but more importantly, share it if you know someone that you think will like it. That's really the main thing that I care about. Thanks very much for listening. I will be working on a couple of I've got a little bit of a backlog at the moment, so I will be doing my best to get some other ones out to you a bit sooner, hopefully, than I normally do. But until then, you can check out the website with more information, and I will speak to you on the next one.